just to tell you, this is going to be an ongoing series. We're going to try to do it every month of various artists, whether it's related to the show or separate from the show. And our next artist is Noah Barnett. A lot of people know his mural work throughout Albuquerque. And so he's going to be on the 26th, Monday the 26th at noon. So if you have free time, we'd love to see you come back, tell other people about it, and get some word out about our series. So I want to thank you, Nikesha, for being here for our Listen and Learn series. Yeah. It is an honor to have you here. We know that you've been so busy in the last year, and we just wanted to kind of catch up with you and find out about the projects that you've been working on and really how they've influenced your work. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing that you have been working on has been the National Monument in Alabama. For those of you who don't know, it was created by the Equal Justice Initiative. The Freedom Monument Sculpture Park is in Alabama. It's remembering the tens of thousands of black people who were victims of slavery and to trafficking. So, tell us how you learned about this and how it came to be and how you're able to contribute to the memorial.
So my work, just even, you're familiar with it, but for those who aren't so familiar, I work in a lot of different mediums.
Right.
I work in sculpture, large-scale oil painting, performance art, installation work, film work, and all of it is really focused around the reclamation of African diasporic history and storytelling and really honoring all the ancestors in that way. And so I say that my work is really research-based and is really set on historical research and filling my mind-body with these stories that need to be spoken and told. And so every one of my projects, no matter what medium it is really kind of highlighting an untold or invisibilized part of African diasporic history. So the 108 Death Masks project, I started it in 2018, and it began as a ritual practice for myself of trying to honor and even could understand the amount of loss from the slave trade, the amount of people who died in that passage from the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade and the capture and torture in the villages and communities and towns throughout so many countries and tribes of West Africa, all the way through the dungeons to the transatlantic passage into enslavement in the United States and throughout the Americas. And it's countless. I mean, it's really at the highest number, it's in the millions, 25, 30 million people were lost just in the passageways. But then as we go through the years, hundreds of years of enslavement, it just becomes exponential. And so it becomes a number that's almost hard to imagine.
Right.
And the highest number I've heard when talking about the complete expanse over 400 or 500 years was 108 million lives lost. And that to me was again, unimaginable.
Right.
And so I decided I wanted to go about a practice of one a day for 108 days to try and imagine one single face of a lost ancestor and to engage with it in a form of prayer for all of the million behind it, and all of the million ahead of it that, I would like to see living in freedom, and how can I, as in this cross kind of way, as a being, change the course of our movement of life and humanity.
Which is hard to do when people don't even know their own history.
When people don't even know, exactly. And so for me, showing and holding an individual being that is representing so many lost and telling the story and talking about the real numbers and looking at the real levels of devastation on all of those planes, helps people, I hope, come to the grips with where and who we are and why so much of the things that are happening in our world are happening and why there's still continual oppression and mass incarceration. I mean, all of these things are happening now.
Right.
And if we can, in that crossroads, make a concerted effort as a people to change it, to be active, to actively engage personally with that change, and it's hard, because we always feel like these things are so systemic that they're outside of our control.
Right.
And
we just give up. We just
yeah,
say, well,
that we
that's how
can't
it
do
is.
anything, and well, I'm a good person. I don't ever mean anybody harm, and so I'm not contributing. And
Right,
all of these ways that we don't stand in total accountability with both our history and our individual responsibility for the future. Mm-hmm. And so this artwork was, for me, an intentional space where people could come and pray in whatever way that meant for them, even if it was just taking a single breath and a single moment to dedicate themselves to the furtherance of peace and justice and liberation for oppressed people. And if that could be in the form of one single breath with one single face, one single death mask, then by the time they've made it through 108, my dream is that something has shifted in them that actually changes the way that they are in the world. Yeah. And that those small changes with everyone who encounters the work begins to change communities subtly. And it's, in a way, all I can do is create a space for that.
Yeah. So this really was a period of years that you were working on this, and then other projects. But then, how did the Freedom Monument group or the Equity Initiative group catch up with you? Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that work in 2018 as a personal prayer, as a personal art practice. There was no show in mind. There was nobody who was going to see this work. My kids thought I was crazy in my house, sculpting 108 death masks. But I did it, and then in 2019 I had the opportunity to show the work in Michigan at the Art Prize competition. I was accepted into the Art Prize with this installation, and was given a 100-foot wall in the convention center, the DeVos Place, downtown Grand Rapids, and over 400,000 people saw the work.
Wow.
And I got the juried vote and the public vote, and people for a month it was there. I was with it every day, while hordes of people came through and witnessed and cried and prayed and experienced this work. And it got a lot of national recognition, and in the end I ended up winning the juried three-dimensional installation award as well as the Black Contemporary Arts Award in that competition. And so it was definitely a huge moment.
I'm sure. It was a heady, very heady moment.
Yeah, for sure. It was the first time for me as an artist also having that level of recognition and that level of support for what I was doing and the uniqueness of what I was doing. And so that sort of put it into the world's eye in a way. I think it got out there. And then I ended up connecting through that with an artist in Ghana who was doing a very similar project in Ghana, sculpting funerary heads. And so I went to Osambra Studio and met the artist Kwame Akoto, and ended up being a visiting artist there. And he was an artist that had done an installation with EJI. So there are ways where they started seeing that I was doing work with him, and then in 2022, I got a cold call email from the EJI saying that we've seen your work over all these years, we've loved it. As soon as we saw it, we knew it belonged in our museum, and we're currently in the process of building a new national monument, and we wanted to see if you would be able to recreate this work as a permanent installation for this national monument.
So did it take on a new life? I mean, you're going down to Alabama, you're on the Delta, that was a focus of slave trade that came through there, the Selma rights movement, the G's Ben quilters. Did all that shift your work again as you were putting in the 108 death masks, or did it just add to the...
It all added to it. I mean, like I said, I went into the process with the ceramic work with such intention, where I was praying every day, 108-day ritual. Every single aspect of the clay work was incredibly intentional and honoring. So when asked from the EJI, can you recreate it in bronze? Not having or being a foundry myself, I was like, how do you do that? Yeah. I guess I could send them off to a foundry. There's all these kinds of foundries I could just send all of my ceramic masks to, and they could replicate them. But it felt like it stopped the prayer practice a little bit and disconnected it from this honoring that was so essential for me. And so I said, that's not how I want to do it. I want to do it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
I called my friend in Ghana and said, hey, I'm going to be embarking on this huge bronze project. Do you know of any like traditional West African bronze workers? It has one of the oldest traditions in the world of bronze and metalwork, and it's a spiritual tradition, and particularly a tradition for ancestors. And I was like, do you know anybody who's doing it in the old ways, like holding the old traditions, carrying the cult teachings, and would they welcome me in as a mentee, you know, to learn? And he connected me with Ibrahim Isaka, who is a phenomenal, like, he's been doing it his whole life, tradition carrier of the bronze work. So I went to Ghana, West Africa, and I brought all of the ceramic masks back across the ocean, which in and of itself was a powerful and symbolic experience to bring them home. To bring them home, and then to engage in 5 months worth of individual mentorship in the old ways of honoring.
Can you describe a little bit of that? Because none of us know.
Yeah, so everything is prayer. The forge is like really an altar of prayer, and it's a place of connection with the gods of fire and transformation. And they pray with the forge. The process of making the masks meant collecting natural materials. So because it's all done in the earth, everything is done outside and with your hands. So they had, we took my ceramic masks and we first made a mold. And this is the part that was sort of more contemporary, because we had to use silicone. So we made a silicone mold of my ceramic mask. And talking with him, he said, normally we make everything starting from the wax. But since you have the ceramic already, we just have to make it wax. So we made a silicone mold, and then we collected beeswax. And so like from the bees, which were everywhere, and we also had to like fend off the bees that would come to us as we were collecting all of the wax. But collecting wax, they brought the wax, melted it down, and we poured it into the silicone molds and made wax copies. And so each of the wax copies, I was able to then go through and kind of re-sculpt myself and re-detail and touch and kind of, give them new life. Yeah. And so some of them have, also the wax is unique because it's coming, again, like more, it's raw and unrefined. So there were certain qualities of the wax that were, would create some textures and things like that on the surface as well. So they were really new. So I recreated the waxes, and then from there, Ibrahim would collect donkey dung from the land and break it into a fine grass-like powder by hand. And so we'd sit on the ground and just break it up together in a big pile. And then there's huge termite mounds and anthills all throughout West Africa. And that clay has been basically processed through the termites' bodies, and it's fire resistant. It's incredibly powerful and super elastic. So in the old termite mounds, once they move out, the mounds stay. And so they would collect the clay from the termite mounds, which has this very strong fire resistant property. That clay mixed with the donkey dung, mixed with fine sand from the land as well, made like an adobe mud. That mixture was hand pounded to get all of the fine particles of sand crushed into dust and as smooth as possible. And so done in small little handful batches with a hammer on a steel plate. It was ground, and then that's pressed into the wax. And so then the wax gets coated in this mud like adobe and then dried in the sun. And once that's dried, it's put into a fire and heated so the wax is soft enough to be melted out, poured out, and then that shell is even buried more in the earth with fire to bake the clay all the way. And then when it was baked and while it's heated up, then we created a furnace with charcoal with the same termite mud, like adobe, and a little blower to create the furnace heat, which we would then melt all of the scrap bronze. So this bronze was collected, scrap and salvage bronze from like all over
Yeah.
West Africa. So, we would go to these wild metal places, and, they would weigh out pieces of the metal, very precious, faucet pieces, and, all kinds of things, because, again, it's very much like what we can get. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that there's all of these mines there for these precious metals, but they all get shipped out to Western European countries, and then they get shipped back in the form of product, and then those products we end up melting back down. So there's this whole loop of lost capital, really, for the African people. But that metal is what we used, and that gets melted down and then poured into the hot shells. We pull them out of the ground, still hot, pour the metal in, let it cool, break the shell, and then you have this bronze mask.
Which is interesting because, repatriating them home, when you think about the history of what has happened to people they're enslaved, it does change them. So you are bringing them back home in a new way, and then taking them back after being enriched with being home again.
Yes, and they're coming this time actually in a different way. Mm-hmm. They're coming actually as teachers and guardians, and revered, and I feel like, especially in the process, the delicate process, all these steps and all of these kind of animal and earth spirits that go into creating this mask, all of the hands that went into it. For the next days I would spend like filing and cleaning and refining the masks and getting them ready, and then they get polished. All of that is, for me, just more and more layers of prayer and like saying thank you. We're going to make you so shiny and beautiful so that you can shine your light on the world and help support the prayers for the people that will come and experience it. And so I finished all of that work with Ibrahim in Ghana, and then brought all of them back here, and then we've just installed. And I tell you, the installation was incredibly emotional and powerful to do it. Even showing up at the site, it's a 100-foot wall, freestanding, cement, polished. It was the biggest footing in this park. It has some of the most phenomenal artists in the world, African artists in the world, are in this park, doing installations, and mine's kind of the largest footing. And it's quite a powerful installation. All of them are installed in a single line, eye level. I'm excited for people to see it.
Your work is multimedia, as you've said, but its focus is specifically on 19th century Blackness. And that's probably where you see the least representation of Blackness or Black culture in American art. So there's kind of this vagueness, this opaqueness to who we are. We're present, but we're not really present. We're kind of in the peripheral. So there's an expression that academics call critical fabulation. So because we don't have the history, it allows people to make up our history or omit it altogether. So the work that you're doing, is it a mission to correct exclusion, basically, in your work?
Yeah, there's part of it is that, there is, as you said, it's a very narrow period of time that a lot of my work is coming from. And specifically, I'm working with, in my paintings specifically, I'm working with photos that are taken from the 1850s till 1900. The daguerreotype and tinted daguerreotype was invented in the late 1840s and really came to the United States in the 1850s. And that was the very first photographic process, and it was incredibly rare. It was 15 years before emancipation, and who were taking photos of Black folks? And they weren't. You couldn't take a photo outside. It was in a studio. It was like a 45-minute exposure. It took a lot of expensive equipment that was very novel. And so that period of time is a very unique time of capturing the image of Black folks. And like you said, there's almost nothing before then of anything other than caricature and stereotype and cartoon-like images. And this, invisibilization completely of Black beings in there. And so photos from then are very rare. So for me, even seeing these photos is powerful, to be able to see Black folks and to wonder about their stories. The Library of Congress, which is where I get a lot of these images from the National Archive, there's not very many, but they're all anonymous. Almost all of them have no names at all. And so really all we have is this image, and it was probably the only image ever made of this individual. And so there's this, for me, a reclaiming of our personhood, of our existence.
Yeah.
If anything, it's like, it is like going against that exclusion and saying, yes, we were here.
Yeah.
I don't know their stories either, but the beings themselves have so much to say. And so for me, I want to paint them big and life-size so that you can stand in front of them like a real person and actually be witnessed by them, as well as witness them as a real person with a real story, even if we can't grasp it. And they'll resist us making up stories about them, I find. You'll come in face to face and have some idea of who you think or why because of this way they're dressed or this type of thing of what their story is. But then as you look at the beings, they have other things to say, And so for me, it's really important to show us, to fill that memory of us that we did exist and our stories were much bigger than what has been told.
Yeah. Do you get a response from, I'm sure the response from children is completely different from their parents or from elders. Each time they look at your work, it's a different interpretation of who we are. But it still it's still that void, whether it's a current void of not having the resources to tell our story, or the void that we just were never given the opportunity to tell that story. Do you see that through your work, that people have different interpretations of our invisibility?
For sure. Again, and that comes into like what we know now, like what we're being taught now, what stories that are being shared. When you grew up, what did you know about Black folks other than MLK had a dream and Rosa Parks like sat on a bus or something like there's not much more people know.
Exactly.
And so there's that no, there were really powerful stories. Like, let's talk about what happened with W.E.B. Du Bois in the 1900 World Fair and how he presented Black African Americans, to people, and the ways that, we were living and creating middle class, and upper class, wealth, and, what about all the different communities and towns that were built up across the country that were some of the most literate and, active and financially stable and sustainable communities in the country, that were many of them destroyed, through racism. These histories are really important for us and inspiring to Black folks now, and to all folks, I hope, now, around the ways that we can think differently outside of the structures of white supremacy and capitalism.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about our history, but even the history that's not shown, we don't really know about. We talk about that missing photographic history, but I want to talk a little bit about the show that you did at the Albuquerque Museum, which was about indigo. Again, another missing piece of who we were economically in terms of trade, how we influenced the world with that one piece of a plant and the materials that we created. Can you tell us a little bit about the show? Because I don't know if everybody saw the show. It was in 2022 at the Albuquerque Museum. It was more of a group show. But Nikesha's work, you had not only just the sculptural work, but you also had a larger piece that was more about, was it the Arc of Return and Sanctuary Wound?
Yeah.
They weren't combined, I don't think, but...
They were, one was in Santa Fe at Form and Concept, and the other is at the museum. So yeah, there are two different places.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Indigo show first. And again, that missing piece of who we are in terms of adding economically, historically, literally, culturally to the world.
Yeah, I feel like there's always these stories, they're always interwoven with our stories of land and with plants and with relationships to land. And so that piece was called Red, White, Black, and Blue, an homage to African American indigo. And it was 2 freestanding sculptures that are about 6 feet tall or so, a little taller than me. There are 2 tall stacks of Levi's American blue jeans on top of a pile of raw indigo fabric, and then raw indigo, and then raw cotton, and then salt on the ground. And the top of the sculptures were hand sculpted ceramic hands and feet. Their feet on one and hands on the other. And you know, I love the precariousness of them, but also sort of the power, the very narrow, long things with these very delicate hands on the top. And the hands were stained blue all the way down to the elbows, and the feet were stand up to the knees. And so the piece is honoring the physical bodies of the Black people who cultivated cotton and indigo in the United States, and who were historically the first people to create, make, and wear blue jeans. You know, that the history of the American blue jean is something that has been very quickly sort of appropriated and whitewashed, and we have this idea of the white cowboy in blue jeans, and both of those things are actually stolen from the reality of blackness.
Cowboys were black men.
Because cowboys were black men. You know, they were the black men who were working with the horses, and you know, they called them the cowboys. You know, but that got reappropriated and by James Dean and all these people, you know, and the white, you know, image of Americana, and particularly the American blue jean became such a huge part of our national image as well as economy. But the blue jean started with enslaved people who wore this thick, rough, hand-hewn, hand-dyed cotton fabric for the work that they were doing. And also in that time, it set them apart from the fine linens that the owners and masters would wear. And it became very popular. It was worn by enslaved people in the shipyards, you know, working throughout California, where Levi Strauss saw them and said, wow, why don't we put some rivets on that? Yeah. You know, basically, and began to start that new empire. And so the pieces were really talking about that history, re-envisioning that history, and really at the top of all of it, honoring the physical bodies that, you know, are invisibilized and disappeared, you know, within it. And so, yeah, that was a really important piece and still is.
Yeah. So the Ark of the Sanctuary was really more in line with some of the feminist work that you do. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, well, I love that you bring it up too. So we've been talking a lot about the past. So I call my work Afrofuturist. And a lot of people are like, how do you call your work Afrofuturist when you do so much work with the past? Like, it's Afro-pastist. But for me, Afrofuturist is actually exactly correct, because the lens of Afrofuturism for me is really saying that, you know, when we were cut from our land, from our timelines, from our communities and generational storytelling, that cut and severance, you know, of the horrible tragedy, you know, of African enslavement and oppression, like, it can be seen as a loss. Like, we've lost, you know, all of that back. But that, to me, is if looking at it linearly, you know, if we can look at that cut actually as a, like, freedom from the timeline, that, you know, African diasporic bodies can actually recreate and do their own understanding of time and place, and that, in fact, have to and had to recreate a new timeline, new understanding of who and what and how and where we belong in the world. And those timelines have, you know, are created through family, through community. They're created through our ability to recognize the past, our ability to even think through the future. I mean, our futures were stolen too with enslavement. You know, a lot of the, you know, slave wills, you know, I've been talking actually with a lawyer right now about perpetuity laws. You know, there were so many wills that said, you know, this person is going to be passed on as your slave and all of their children forever. You know, and like, so we have these things that have cut off our futures. And so claiming back our futures at the same time as claiming back our pasts, to me, is an essential part of the Afrofuturist work. Mm-hmm. And they go hand in hand. Yeah. So as I'm healing through these past stories and retelling them and re-bringing and re-infusing them with honor, all of it is to seed into and support the futures that we want to create and the ways that we want to engage with what's to come. So the Arc of Return, to me, is an Afrofuturist boat. It's a magical artifact, in a way, from the Afrofuture. It was a life-size boat that I made out of Baltic birch. I built the entire frame out of wood. Baltic birch also, birch is the wood that's used to create aspirin. Traditionally, like
really,
you could chew on the birch bark, and it has a similar pain relieving quality. And so, so having the whole thing made out of birch is a soothing. It's supporting like the layers of pain and grief in our histories. And then the whole thing, I hand sewed copper mesh onto the surface of the wooden boat. So the whole thing was skinned in a copper mesh, and then I etched hundreds of sheets of copper with African diasporic lost languages. So languages from many cultures and communities in West Africa, and then the syncretic communications that came across through like Santeria and the Gulagichi and Haitian Voodoo and Yoruba and Akan languages. All of these things throughout the West, it's like this side, but all of those languages together, those symbols I etched into the copper. So they're all etched with acids. So it's quite extensive etching. And then, so there's hundreds of plates that then were individually appliqued onto the boat's mesh. And so the whole thing took on a almost fish-like scaled surface with etchings. The back of the boat says return. And so the boat is called the Arc of Return. And my vision was, I forget too, the inside of the boat has, when it's standing just alone, a 6-foot copper plate that has a 3-headed figure that has it's like a maiden, a grandmother, and an infant in the womb. So to me, in a way, a farrier between past, present, and future holds the center of the boat. So this vessel, in my mind, is a vessel that can move through all of these places and return us, to our histories, to our futures, to our living present bodies.
Return to forever.
Return to forever. And so it's called the Arc of Return, and that's kind of a play on words too, because it's all made of copper, so it's highly conductive electrically. So there's this arc. It's also like the ark, in a way too, the mythical ark that carries, all of these beings to create new life. And so the Arc of Return sits in the middle of the sanctuary of wound, and that sanctuary, is kind of its home and sacred space in a way in its installation. It had, and again, you hear as I talk through stuff, every single thing is symbolic, right? Like all of it matters. All of it is part of the prayer, which is what makes it, for me, real. Because otherwise I'm just making art, which is awesome. But I actually want to do things for me, for my people, for all people in some subtle, powerful, visceral way, So for me, I put the prayer into it. And so the sanctuary is 108, which that's now my favorite number, 108 feet of cotton, which in its raw form was about the amount that one person could produce in a day in the cotton fields. The cotton is soaked in wheat, sugar, and corn, which were also all major plantation crops. So those plant species sort of hold the space. The sugar and the corn also, in a way, starch the fabric a little bit, so it's stiff when you walk in. It's this 20 feet tall. I hang them really tall, and they're vertical, and just kind of create a circular space that you can enter. And it would feel like the fabric would be billowing and moving, but it's still, which creates sort of a mausoleum-like feel. When you walk in, there's this still semi-translucent fabric, which also, is sort of obscuring but also protecting what's inside. The ground I filled with 2,000 pounds of composted cotton burrs, So again, all of the detritus of the cotton process is underneath the boat. And I created the space ultimately as a performance space. So it's a sculptural space to walk into, to pray into, and to hold. But then it's also a performance space. So I would move the center copper plate out, and I put a wooden sort of stage plate inside the boat. And then I did a 12-hour ritual performance with that in Santa Fe at its first opening, where I actually buried women in the ground of the composted cotton burrs in a ritual process of, honoring the death and the dismemberment of those bodies through time and individually, and then unburied them and then washed them inside the boat very carefully, very slowly, as a way of retying them back to their bodies, to their futures, to their pasts. And so the arc of return, becomes a space for real healing,
Now, I know after all that, you're going to have a bunch of questions, and we're going to open it up to the audience in just a minute, but I want to ask a few more questions. And it goes into, yes, it was feminism, but you're also a huge environmentalist in doing your work. How can you marry the two? I mean, is it you think of one first and then goes, I could add this into it too, or is it all a complete genesis when you start your work?
I think it's inseparable. I think that our, feminism, environmentalism, our work for, Black and Indigenous liberation, across the world is all completely inextricably connected. Mm-hmm. To imagine they can be separated, I think is the part that makes it hard for us, because then none of them move forward. Right. Like our feminist actions are our environmental actions. They're all connected. And Black queer feminists have said that forever. So many. So I definitely see it as one thing, and it's inextricabely a part of everything that I do in my work.
And those who forget the past are condemned to repeat the future.
Yeah, they are, and they are. It is happening.
Yeah.
We're doing it right now.
Sadly. And the last question I want to ask before everybody, might have their questions. You are a multimedia artist, but where does the DJing come into this?
You bring that in. I'm a musician and love music and love making music, and it is also connected. I feel like all music is prayer. I think that dance is prayer. I think that dance and music and vibration is one of the ways that we communicate to our ancestors and through, into our futures. We all need to shake our bones, literally, to move those ancestral spirits that live inside them. And so it's just always been a part of my life. My dear friend Chelsea Stewart, who's an incredible DJ and friend and mentee, we decided to start doing a small DJ project called Afrofuture Sound System, and creating and playing music that is one gets your body moving, and the other also is educational and incorporate Black feminist thinking and writers and stuff into the music that I play, and so that's sort of like a side little alter ego project that I do that I don't talk about too much. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, I was because I try to pay attention to what's going on in Santa Fe, and then I see your DJ now. It's like, wait a minute, she just had a show down in Albuquerque. So I try to figure out all the different processes that you go through. It's just amazing.
It's a lot, yeah.
The one thing I do want to see if you can tie into you're talking always about the future is AI. And we're seeing so many artists that are incorporating AI into their work. Were you able to use AI for 108 masks, 108 faces, or was that just something that you use as a tool?
I don't use AI in any of my work itself, like any of the work I actually produce. I have seen, and I embrace technology. I'm very much on the side of Octavia Butler, who absolutely embraced the future and how we are going to move out and see the universe and the stars and travel through other planets. And I'm with her. I'm on it. And how do we become really good people who are able to incorporate the width of technology that is good into our growth of humanity, I think is important. There's a lot of scary things with AI. There's a lot of ethical things with AI. Every single new tool that comes into our purview has to be carefully held and seen and recognized for its power and who's wielding that power. You know, I think it can go many ways. I've found use with AI purely for me so far in helping to dream up things. You know, like there's ways that I've been able to put in ideas that I've already been working on for a long time. Being like, I really, like, for example, which you all are getting the very first little into my dreaming process, but I really love working with copper, as you can tell. And I want to create an entire kind of copper sanctuary. I imagine a gallery or museum space with floor to ceiling etched copper walls, with all of these prayers, with these beings embedded. I imagine being able to walk in and have the vibration of that space and a room that is filled with all of it, you know. And so I'm looking at creating modular large-scale copper panels, thinking of, you know, industrializing the etching process into big, you know, huge sheets, and how do you do that? And so my brain's going in all these ways, and has been for a while. So I've gone to AI and been like, show me a museum space filled with light, floor to ceiling, copper walls etched with African American figures, and like just list everything that I just said to you, what I want. And it'll show me an image. And I can go, whoa, that's cool. That's kind of what I was thinking, not exactly what I was thinking, but that's a cool way that they mounted that in this AI picture. Or that's an interesting way they did like a cutout doorway. I would never have thought that. Like, so those types of things become helpful for me to then turn around and be like, can I make that? Can I do it? Is that a good way? Can I get an engineer to help me do that? And so it becomes a jumping off point for potential creations. But I wouldn't like take that image and put it on the wall and say that's my art. That's not what I'm looking for. You know, so I'm curious about the ways that it can inspire artists to create new work, to dream things bigger than they would have imagined. Ways that it can, just support the process, but not necessarily as the art itself. I see it as like Photoshop, basically, like just another cool tool that we can grow with.
Well, here's what's cool, and maybe this is something that you will think about and create some work about. You know, I spoke with Professor Melanie Moses over at the University of New Mexico, and she's in computer sciences. The research that she has done has said that, you know, there's always a bias in anything that is done. What she finds fascinating is that there's a critical lack in AI when it comes to people of color. You can ask, show me a black doctor treating a white patient, and AI will not do that. It just won't do it. And she has tried numerous applications for this, and it still won't do it. It'll show a black doctor treating patients, it will show white people in a nursing room, but it will not show a black doctor treating a white patient. So perhaps this is a Afrofuturistic dilemma that needs to be solved through
artist
engagement.
That's what I believe too. You know, and it's like a secret part too, is that I love feeding blackness into the AI algorithm. I do. I love going in and asking again and again for black people, happy black people, joyful black people, big fat beautiful black people, not skinny model black people, you know, like old black people, happy, rich. You know, like all of the things we don't see. I love telling AI to do that and make them, you know, and even if it's just for me, feeding the algorithm again and again so I can see it, I do think that it's helping. You know, the more of us that do that, the more AI is going to learn that is an important and real thing. AI's bias is there, but it's because the bias has always been there. It's been trained on the bias. But we have the capacity as human collaborators to shift that bias And so I think the more Black creatives that engage with the AI and feed it Black images and Black ideas, the more that it will produce the things that are true that we want to see.
So we have to be disruptive cogs in the machine, basically.
Yes.
All right, you guys, I'm opening it up to you. And as a former reporter, there are no bad questions. So please, we have an amazing guest here. So if you have any questions, please ask.
I don't know if I have a question, but I'm interested in your comment about you don't want to just make art. When I was in art school, I felt like a lot of it was not just about mediums and learning about them, but it was about sort of theory and strategy and making a statement. And I like that you seem to have discovered right away that it's really a prayer and a meditation and an inquiry, and that you made your process that.
Yeah.
And that's super nice to me. And to encounter people crying in front of your work, you realize it sort of has to be that.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that reflection back. And it's true, like I didn't go to art school, which I think I'm lucky that I didn't do that. I mean, I had a very unconventional pathway to art, to visual art. And so, you know, but I've seen and I recognize that there's so many artists that really get stuck in this idea that they have to like, make a statement or like stick with a medium or create a body of work that like says a certain thing and it like and to sell or whatever it is. Like there's all of these strictures that push people, and for better or worse, my process has been really different. It has been like, actually I'm just going to make the art because it's a prayer, because I need to. It doesn't matter if anybody ever sees it or goes anywhere. I'm going to just make it because it's what has to happen. And you know, the process becomes the art itself. And I try to explain that whenever people see my work too, because they see a lot of cool things going on in it when they look at it, but they don't realize like how much actually goes on in it until they talk to me. But you know, like, but they feel like they feel it, like you said, like they cry in front of it, or they feel that even if I don't tell them everything that went into it, you know. And I think that it's really important. So thanks.
Anyone else? You guys, come on, I know you have questions.
Yes.
I'm curious, you said you're really interested in working with copper and envisioning the space. What draws you to that material, to reality?
Copper is, you know, it's a pure element. It's one of the purest elements we have, you know, in our planet. It's, as I said, highly conductive energetically and physically. It shows up in more things than we know, you know, in our world. So it's kind of innocuously connected into so many things. You know, it's an essential part of bronze, it's an essential part of brass. It's essential, you know, it's an essential metal element in so many things. Copper is like on, you know, inside our bodies, it's healthy and good. Like we actually like drinking and having copper elements in our body helps our immune system. Wearing it on our body helps reduce inflammation. I mean, there's all these things that make copper just a lovely element to work with. It's also quite satisfying because it's responsive too. There's a lot of things you can do with it, from etching with electricities or acids to patinas with salts and vinegars. It's responsive to the environment. You know, so for me, it actually represents sort of a kind of an ideal partner or ally in this work of healing, of resistance, of, you know, everything that I'm doing and working through history. Like to have an element that is going to move energy, is going to heal bodies, is going to, you know, communicate across multiple threads, as well as work good with other things. Like all of those are qualities that I think are important in building, you know, a resistant community and a practice. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Copper's awesome. I guess I could have just said that.
Well, that's, you know, it leads me into the question, and I think of this all the time, and we had a prior conversation. You are offering ways for people to reconcile and heal. How does the artist heal thyself?
That's such a good question, and I am reminded of when I first showed the death masks in Michigan, and I was there for like a month. every day, and like saying like, oh, 400,000 people saw the work. 400,000 people saw the work. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's a lot of energy, and I was there witnessing and receiving so much of people's energy. They would come through after breathing 108 times and praying 108 times with these masks. They'd come out in tears and have nowhere to put it. And then they'd see me. And then they'd come over and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. To me. Which makes sense.
Wow.
But it also, it's not me.
Right.
But people feel like they need to apologize, especially, you know, white folks, a lot of folks that have like generational shame or grief, you know, also, and desire to move it in their bodies. They look for help to me. They're like, you know, they see that I've done something that's actually touched them, and then they want to come and apologize because they don't know who else to say it to. And so there's partly, you know, this place where I had to learn how to, like, do the Tai Chi, like, with that energy all the time.
Gotta flow, gotta move,
like,
yeah.
Thanks. But sometimes it would hit me, and I found myself having a lot of emotions that would come up, a lot of feeling of being drained, a lot of feeling of not being capable of holding the amount of grief that was moving through the work. And I remember one time kind of exhausted, sitting there, and this indigenous woman from Michigan, and I apologize, I don't remember the specifics of the tribe that she was carrying, but she came and sat down next to me, and she was like, this is powerful work you're doing, you know, this is powerful work that you are sharing, and ancestral work that you're doing. And she's like, how are you taking care of yourself? Like, who's caring for you? How are you cleaning your bones, is what she said.
Wow.
And I was like, good question. You're right. Like, I need that. Like, I need that. I need that help. I need those peoples. I need those practices. I was like, I don't know. I don't have anybody. Like, who are my people? And it put me into a real journey, because it was my first time ever doing that kind of work in such a big scale. It was the first time showing this prayer work that I just did. And so I didn't know. I was like, oh, dang, I really wasn't prepared all the way. You kind of sometimes go in a little ego-y, and not ego-y, but just like ignorant or naive a little. I was just like, I can do this. I can deal with millions of ancestral trauma. All of you. And no, you can't. You can't. And so for me, that began a real journey of me asking those questions, reaching out to those people in my community, the elders in my community that do clearings and cleansing and help. And so I do that. Now I have really regular practices where I go to people and they pray on me and they help me clear it out, and they give me the medicines to move it through my body, you know, the prayers or the, you know, tools to move it through and out. I've learned ways to shield myself from people's projections more, and things that I can say and do to help support that. I tend to direct people to, like, you know, when they say, I'm so sorry, I'm like, oh, good. That's great. I'm really glad that you're feeling that. That means that you have energy to move it in your life towards something. Hold that feeling. That's a great one. Not for me, but for you, to hold and use and change something, you know? And so I try to help people carry that grief as action into their lives if possible.
It's so fascinating because people have this confessional aspect to them. If something moves them, they feel the need that they have to share where they were, who was there, what they experienced with it, because they feel an instant connection. And I feel that if we don't have that through art, we're lost as a people. I don't know if you feel the same way, that people do have, they use art as that communication, that things that propels them to be able to communicate with other people. I think we're losing that ability to really talk and share and feel comfortable with that. So your work is very strong.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I was wondering, the exhibition of the tribe, had you
I would love that. I'm always excited and interested in engaging in creating public artworks and spaces for people to come to. And working with the city, I'd love to continue to grow relationships to be able to do that, for New Mexico. And so, yeah, it's on my radar and, desire for sure. And yeah. Yeah, for Juneteenth. Yeah, I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization here in New Mexico called Earthseed Black Arts Alliance, and we put on the Juneteenth event in Santa Fe every year. And so last year we were able to, or the year before we were able to make it an official holiday for Santa Fe, and have now continued to do it. So I've been always mostly engaged with the Juneteenth in Santa Fe. Although we did come and do with my dear friend Tigre and co-founder a mural project at one of the Juneteenths a couple years ago here in Albuquerque as well. So we kind of had a partner. And then this year, actually, the EJI's National Monument is opening on Juneteenth. So I'll be in Montgomery for this Juneteenth opening of that National Monument.
It's fantastic.
But yeah.
It's going to be a hell of a celebration.
Yeah, it'll be great. And right now, if you want to see some of my work, I have a series of paintings, drawings, and some small sculptural installations at Richard Levy Gallery in Albuquerque. So that show is called Black Archive, and it's my large-scale oil paintings and sculptures, and it's going to be up until March. I need to get the exact dates because I have too many shows in my head, but it should be up until through March.
So Richard Levy Gallery, if you have a chance to get out and see it, please go see
downtown.
Nikesha's work. I want to thank you for spending this hour with us. It's been really moving and really enjoyable.
Thank you. Did you have a question too? I know you were the last one.
I was waiting for you, Nima. You just kept like on the edge. Come on, come on.
Before you close, I just want to give you an opportunity.
I always want to allow space for, others to be able to interface, since we've been able to do that in community on occasion.
Yeah.
So I graciously thank you for being here, for making the efforts to travel the waters. For many, they haven't made that return physically. And so you represent, a history and a legacy and a future that infuses into all of these environments. So it's been beautiful to hear about the elements that you create with and why, because I've had the opportunity to experience so many of them. And the intention of the strength that you bring into the thought process of how that is created, because definitely experiencing the return and not having traveled the waters and stepped on the soil myself, that was exactly the experience that I had, of the strength with how the cotton fell, and I didn't even consider the process. I would like to highlight a little bit or hear some of the work that you've done with the youth, because they certainly are the living vessel by which our future can shift and change. And I always say to people, we're one generation in birth from giving them the world and the universe that is our wildest imagination and dreams. So if you could just speak a little bit to the work that you've done with the young people and what you really see that we need to develop and continue to push through, so that we are, I think, the catalyst for helping them with the trauma and the healing and the change for our Black and Indigenous communities.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that in.
So,
Yeah, through Earthseed, we've done a number of projects collaboratively with the youth. So we've created, school initiatives. We had for 2 years a Sister Circle and Brother Circle, which are summer camps for Black and biracial teens. I, have taught and been a part of those workshops. I've also been a teacher in public school for a number of years in art. And working with youth, in particularly youth that are from, Indigenous and Black communities and underrepresented and underserved communities, there is so much, like you said, like dealing with intergenerational traumas, unspoken, untalked about, even unacknowledged traumas that come through their bodies, as well as a lot of desire to create and envision new things. And at the same time, they're being pressured from all of the world's social technologies and other pieces that are constantly trying to box them into identity, you know? And so I have found that when I'm working with youth, like how to, like inspire them towards really out of the box thinking, and also just again and again being like, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Like you have total capacity to do everything, and there's nothing that's weird, like nothing that's wrong. Whatever it comes to you is cool and is important and necessary, and so I love to like bring in thinkers and inspiration from thinkers that think really outside of the box. I love Earthseed is really based on Octavia. Octavia is one of these people who really like brought in all kinds of different anthropomorphic ideas of humanity and ways of thinking that are not normalized. And so I try to inspire with other thinkers and feelers. The projects and things that I offer, like physical hands-on projects, I try to teach about this way, where every single thing that you do can be a prayer, can be intentional. Like your choice of this one thing matters, but like doesn't matter so much that like you have to stress out about it. Yeah. But like it matters in that like you can choose to put this in, and only you know why. So I've done a practice with a lot of Black and biracial youth where we create clay spirit vessels. Right? And so we'll just work with a piece of clay. And I'll start them with like a chunk of clay and be like, can you imagine the world without like anything that's ever happened to it? Like this pure, unadulterated moment. This is you. This is your life. This clay that can be shaped. And look, when you do this happens and this changes, but then you can change it again and nothing is left. And like ways of just saying that we don't have to be formed by the things that are outside of us, outside of our control. We have control. And then to create a spirit vessel of any sort that then can hold those secrets, hold those dreams, hold those visions inside it. So I try to create ritual, spiritual, and tactile engagements for youth to help expand that part of their creative thinking, because for me, I'm blown away when I hear like youth talk about like what they see the world as, or what's important to them, or how they envision relationships with other people that are not like we've ever known. Yeah. And I want them to keep pushing that and not have it crushed by society. So. Yeah, I desire to continue to do that. My work with Earthseed is growing. I'm bringing in other like mentees and creating an internship program and an artist residency program in Taos. So hopefully I'll get some more youth to work with there too.
Do you work with Vital Spaces in Santa Fe too?
Yeah, so Rashawn, who is one of the founders of Earthseed, is the director of Vital Spaces. So there's a lot of cross-pollination and partnerships that we do with them too. Mm-hmm.
Pick up Santa Fe magazine this month. Sean's on the front, talks all about his work, so it's important. And selfishly, when you talk about working with youth, I think people they say okay, arts, that's great, but selfishly, I know that a lot of businesses really do look at young artists because they have the capacity to think outside the box. Yeah. They work with a myriad of people and don't cut people off. And that's what's really needed for our community. If they leave, then the economic base does drop out. And people don't really think about how important that is with our youth having art in their lives. They think it's just another elective in a classroom, but it really changes our community and moves it forward.
Yep. Our greatest scientists are artists. Our greatest mechanical engineers are artists. All of our thinkers and builders and planners and people who might not ever imagine they're artists are artists. You have to be able to do powerful, good, and essential things in the world. Like it's essential part of the thinking process. If you love like details, all of it is a part of art. You know, that's all another thing I tell my students all the time. You know, one of my first classes in my art class is like, all right, y'all, define art. You know, which of course I can't do.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, define artist.
Yeah.
You know, can't do it. You know, like, or they'll come up with an idea, artist is somebody who makes something. Well, that's everybody, isn't it? Yeah, it is. You know, so as soon as we break that down and recognize that we all have that capacity to be artists, and that the work that we're doing, no matter what it is a form of art, you know, then it just, it will help us all grow.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Please thank Nikesha for being here. If you have questions for her, please feel free to ask. And again, our next Listen and Learn is on the 26th, which is a Monday, and Noah Barnett will be here to talk about his mural work in the community. So thank you for being here. We're really appreciative. And please let people know about Gallery One. Sign up for our newsletter. We always have really interesting projects that are going on. If you're an artist, please check it out, because we always have RFPs that we post as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin.